What actually happens inside the body? The moment you stop drinking alcohol, most people assume the changes take weeks. But the timeline starts long before that. Within hours, the body is already shifting. Within days, entire systems begin to reorganize. And some of the most significant changes happen far earlier than most people expect. Understanding when and why these changes happen reveals something important about how the human body responds to stress and why the first 72 hours matter more than most people realize. So what is the body actually doing in those first hours after the last drink? While alcohol is still circulating, the liver is working at full priority. Alcohol is classified as a toxin, so before the liver can process fat or regulate blood sugar, it focuses almost entirely on clearing alcohol from the system. This process produces a compound called acetaldehyde, a byproduct that is itself toxic. The liver converts it into acetate, then into water and carbon dioxide that the body can safely expel. During this window, fat metabolism essentially pauses and blood sugar regulation becomes less stable. But the moment alcohol levels start to drop, that holding pattern begins to lift. Fat oxidation picks back up. Energy regulation stabilizes. This shift changes how the body uses fuel. Instead of prioritizing alcohol breakdown, the system returns to balancing blood sugar and accessing stored energy. For some people, this is where the first signs of steadier energy begin. Fewer sharp dips, fewer sudden cravings. The system is no longer being interrupted every few hours. It's returning to a rhythm. The recovery doesn't begin after the alcohol is gone. It begins as the alcohol is leaving. But here's something most people don't expect. The first night of sleep after stopping alcohol is often not restful, and there's a specific biological reason why. Alcohol suppresses REM sleep, the stage responsible for memory consolidation, emotional processing, and cognitive recovery. Even a full 8 hours of alcohol-influenced sleep produces less REM than a shorter night of natural sleep. Over time, the brain compensates by building pressure for REM. When alcohol is removed, that pressure releases all at once. This is called REM rebound. Dreams become more vivid. Sleep feels more intense. Some people experience disrupted nights in the first few days, not because something is wrong, but because the brain is restoring what had been suppressed. Within a few nights, sleep architecture stabilizes, and this change carries into the day. Better REM sleep supports memory, emotional regulation, and cognitive clarity. People often notice they feel more rested even if total sleep time hasn't increased. The difference isn't duration, it's depth. The brain is completing processes that have been repeatedly interrupted. At the same time, something else is shifting in the nervous system. And this explains why the first few days can feel mentally uncomfortable, even for people who weren't heavy drinkers. Alcohol enhances GABA, the brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. GABA slows neural activity and produces calm. To compensate, the brain increases excitatory signals to maintain balance. When alcohol is removed, that compensation is still active, but now there's nothing to counterbalance it. The result? Restlessness, irritability, a sense of being wired without being energized. This isn't psychological, it's the nervous system recalibrating its inhibitory and excitatory signals back toward equilibrium. For most people, this window lasts 1 to 3 days. The calm that follows is noticeably different. It's more stable, less dependent on external input. Instead of rising and falling based on a substance, it becomes internally regulated. This is often subtle at first, but over time, it creates a different baseline, one that doesn't require constant correction. Alongside the nervous system, another system is quietly normalizing, one that affects how the body looks and feels in ways people often notice first. Alcohol blocks ADH, the hormone that signals the kidneys to retain water. When ADH is suppressed, the kidneys excrete more fluid than normal, leading to chronic low-grade dehydration. This reduces blood volume and circulatory efficiency, leaving tissues with slightly less oxygen and fewer nutrients. Energy becomes inconsistent. Skin appears dull or faintly inflamed. As alcohol clears, ADH normalizes. Blood volume increases. Circulation improves. Within 48 to 72 hours, skin can appear clearer. Energy steadies, and the persistent low-level fatigue that had felt normal begins to lift. The body wasn't running at full capacity. It was compensating. Now, it no longer has to. This is one of the earliest visible changes. Not dramatic, but noticeable. Small improvements that reflect a larger shift happening underneath. Circulation improving. cells receiving what they need, systems no longer operating under constant strain. By day 3 or 4, one of the body's most critical organs begins doing something it hasn't been able to fully focus on: recovery. Regular alcohol consumption forces the liver to continuously prioritize clearance over its other functions. One well-documented result is fat accumulation. When the liver is occupied with alcohol, it stores fat rather than metabolizing it. This is the early stage of alcohol-related liver damage, even in moderate drinkers. Liver enzymes, markers of cellular stress, often become elevated and show up in standard blood tests. Without that constant input, the liver begins redirecting its energy. Fat in liver cells starts to decrease measurably. In some cases, within the first week, enzyme levels normalize. The liver is one of the few organs that can regenerate damaged tissue, but regeneration requires available capacity. When alcohol stops consuming that capacity, repair accelerates. Around day 5, many people notice something they weren't expecting, something that reveals what they didn't realize they had lost. Mental clarity begins to improve, not sharply, but as a gradual clearing. Focus becomes more reliable. The fog lifts. Part of this is better REM sleep, but there's a second factor: systemic inflammation. Alcohol drives low-level inflammation throughout the body, including the brain. This neuroinflammation is subtle but cumulative, affecting processing speed, mood, and the quality of thought over time. As alcohol is removed, C-reactive protein, a standard marker of systemic inflammation, often drops measurably within the first week. Cytokine activity begins to normalize. People describe the result the same way: more present, more stable, more themselves. That is not coincidence. It is biology. What makes this shift stand out is not just that it happens, but how quickly it becomes noticeable in everyday life. Small moments start to feel different. Decisions feel clearer. Reactions feel less automatic. It's not dramatic or overwhelming. It's subtle but consistent. And over time, that consistency builds into something more stable than what was there before, a baseline that no longer depends on constant correction. And this is often the moment where people realize something important. What felt normal before wasn't necessarily optimal. The baseline had shifted so gradually it went unnoticed. And now, as clarity returns, the contrast becomes visible. Not extreme, but undeniable. The mind feels different when it's no longer working against a constant chemical input. Each system that adjusts during this window, sleep, hydration, the liver, the nervous system, inflammation, doesn't operate in isolation. They interact. Better sleep reduces cortisol. Lower cortisol improves blood sugar regulation. Stable blood sugar supports consistent energy. The body functions as an integrated system, and when one suppressive input is removed, the recovery compounds. Over the following weeks, blood pressure often begins to decrease. Heart rate variability, a marker of how efficiently the nervous system manages stress, improves. Skin continues to clear as circulation stabilizes. Weight regulation becomes more efficient as appetite signaling, fat utilization, and insulin sensitivity normalize. Over months, the risk of fatty liver disease, cardiovascular disease, and several alcohol-associated cancers begins to decrease. These are not immediate effects. They are the result of sustained change that accumulates from the same first step. The human body doesn't wait for permission to recover. Given the right conditions, it moves toward repair on its own. The mechanisms are already in place. What changes when alcohol is removed is simply the obstruction. So what actually happens when someone stops drinking alcohol? Within hours, the liver shifts priority and metabolism begins to reset. Within the first night, the brain starts recovering the sleep it had been missing. Within days, the nervous system recalibrates, hydration stabilizes, and liver repair begins. Within a week, inflammation is dropping and mental clarity is returning. The body is not waiting weeks to respond. It starts immediately. And that process, quiet, consistent, already underway, begins long before most people ever expect it to.